I think that you are seeing some escalation of that force, right? As we talked about on Friday, what we were doing prior to that was just using words, and now what you've seen President Trump do, he's deployed now the Nimitz carrier strike group into the region, as well as he's now deploying air tankers as well. So what you're seeing is you're seeing some additional portions of his soft power, if you will. If you're looking at it from an escalation of force, he's saying a lot and doing a lot without having to have direct combat action of any type within the region. But when you put a carrier group out there, that carrier group has an aircraft carrier with 60 to 75 aircraft on it. You've got that carrier group also has an attack submarine. It has cruisers. It has Arleigh Burke class destroyers, right? I mean, you're talking about quite a bit of firepower that you're at least moving towards that region. And when, as you hear President Trump say, as well as Netanyahu on the Israel side, that they have air superiority over that region. So that becomes a pretty clear statement that that the U.S. is going to back Israel in this case.
Does it mean that the U.S. will get involved from the perspective of the B-2 Spirit and the bunker buster that we spoke earlier about?
Yeah, it could be, and I think that's going to be one of the true tales for this. I know on Friday I was more along the lines of, unless they're going to go after, if Iran were to go after U.S. bases, I felt like that was going to be the threshold. However, I know there's a lot of talk right now in terms of those military strike options to figure out what that right escalation of force is, to say, okay, well, if it is a valid, what they normally consider valid military targets, which is a lot of what Israel originally was looking at, right? They were looking at the high value individuals within the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Quds Force individuals, regime change type folks, nuclear scientists, as well as the nuclear enrichment facilities like in Natanz, where they have now actually shown that there has been subterranean damage to that based off of satellites. So I think you are starting to see that. I think that if there was going to be an additional escalation with the B-2 Spirit and all that, it would still be looking at those valid military targets.
Wayne, it's interesting you talk about this soft power, deploying the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier strike group. But I also do wonder what you make of what the president did before gathering in the House Situation Room with his advisors, that he posted some things on his social media site. He posted a demand for Iran's unconditional surrender, warned of a possible strike against the country's leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. We also know, he said, we know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He is an easy target. He is safe there. We are not going to take him out. Kill, in parentheses, he put, at least for now. And I'm not what kind of power is that? I mean, it's very different, right, for a president to be using social media in this way. But we also know President Trump has used this as an effective tool in some regards. But I'm just curious, as someone is used to probably, understanding the military, things are kept quiet until things are, carried out. I'm just I want to have an understanding of how you see his use of social media as being helpful, useful, or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so one of the things that the instruments of national power, if you will, right? The Department of Defense, we normally teach in our war colleges about diplomatic, information, military, and economic, right? As instruments of national power on what you're doing. So whether or not it's economic sanctions against somebody, military, as we mentioned about bringing the USS Nimitz in there, diplomatic in terms of using your agents necessary there to be able to try and bring about some diplomatic peace negotiations as well. And then you have the information piece, and that information, this is an area where we haven't seen in the past a lot of use of social media from a president, but it does still fall within what they call information operations, right? It is putting forth your strategic themes and messages necessary to be able to get your point across. And President Trump uses Truth Social a lot of times to be able to do that. He's not wrong in what he says based off of, United States intelligence collection capability and satellites and everything that's at the U.S.'s disposal. Finding out where some of these leaders are at any given time, that is something that is definitely within the realm of the possibility. And in his decision not to do something like that, I think he's mainly just trying to say, hey, people have asked this question. There have been pieces out there about it where he has waved off saying, no, we're not going to go after the Ayatollah. And now it's a question of, okay, well, we know where he is. It's almost an escalation in that same information operations part of an instrument of power without using any type of military strikes.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wayne, before we let you go, you mentioned the USS Nimitz carrier strike group that's making its way to that area of the world. That's a sign of soft power. What's another signal that you're going to be looking at over the next 24 hours that will tell you that there is indeed has been escalation here?
So right now, if we look at even, we talked about there are 30 tankers, right? 30 tankers on its way right now over to the Middle East. And that's providing for right now, at that point in time, just that air superiority support. But if you were to look at if there were additional capabilities that were going across, carrier strike groups are normally used in this capacity a lot of times, right? They bring it over there as that show of force, and then they withdraw and they draw back, right? The U.S. has done that under many presidents over the last 20, 30 years. But if you were to see additional military capability probably show up, right, it would be another sign of that escalation. It could still be in more of a soft military power, right? It could still be delivering more land troops to a specific area that has the ability to reach that. But if you started to deploy U.S. troops into that area beyond what we already have, like onto Israeli soil, you might see some additional.
I don't want to speculate on anything, but I mean, we'll have to see kind of ultimately where this all goes, right? In terms of the U.S. involvement and what that particularly means, whether it's deploying, aircraft carriers or something more.
Yeah, I mean, calculated, everything that's been done up till now, right, has been done at calculation based off of risk for the political environment that you're in, the geopolitical area. So you really are looking at it from that is what is going to be too much of an escalation. I talked to you guys about action, reaction, and counteraction. And from that perspective is when you look at that is my action going to cause an unrealistic or unpredictable response back? And that is one of the areas that we look at both in the U.S. From the Department of Defense side, but all the other militaries do that as well. Iran's doing that based off of their calculus as they go after Israel, and then the same thing that Israel is doing based off of how their attacks are affecting the political landscape as well as the decision calculus of those leaders.